Welcome to RWG Publishing. Today, we are jumping into a book that really tries to get to the heart of one of the most talked about periods in recent American politics, The Trump Legacy by Bill Vincent. Now, this is the author's detailed take on the policies and the core philosophy of the 45th presidency. So our job here today is to unpack the main arguments from the book to give you a clear picture of the story it tells. Ready? Let's get into it.
So to really get what this book is all about, you got to go back in time with me to 2015. The author Bill Vincent paints this picture of a country just simmering with frustration. He makes the case that the ripples from the 2008 financial crisis were still hitting hard, and a huge part of the country felt completely left behind. I mean, according to the book, people were watching jobs get shipped overseas, their towns were changing, and Washington, D.C., it felt like it was on another planet, totally disconnected from their reality.
And right into that supercharged atmosphere walks Donald Trump. The book doesn't just frame his arrival as another campaign. No, it was a cultural moment. Vincent argues that Trump, with his blunt, straight-to-the-point way of talking and his background as a businessman, not a politician, just got what people were feeling. He wasn't talking about small fixes, he was basically showing up with a wrecking ball for a system that he and a whole lot of voters saw as fundamentally broken.
And that leads us straight into the first big idea the book dives into, what it calls the outsider's promise. Vincent really focuses on Trump's incredible connection with one group in particular, the American working class. Especially in that industrial heartland, the Rust Belt, where so many communities had been hit hard for so long.
But here's the thing the book really hammers home. This message was about so much more than just money. Yeah, of course, he promised to bring back manufacturing jobs to places like Ohio and Michigan. But the author says the real magic, the real connection, went way deeper. It was about giving back a sense of dignity, a sense of purpose, to whole towns that felt like they had been written off. The promise wasn't just about a paycheck. It was about pride. It was about defending a whole way of life.
So the big question is, how do you turn that kind of promise into actual policy? Well, the book lays out a really clear economic game plan that drove the administration, and it all fits under that famous slogan, America First. Vincent then walks us through exactly what they did to make that slogan a reality. And it all started with a massive shakeup of how America does business with the world.
And this slide really shows the heart of that shakeup. On one side, the book presents the old trade deal, NAFTA, as basically Exhibit A for everything that went wrong. It's framed as this deal that encouraged companies to pack up and move to Mexico, leaving American towns hollowed out. And then, on the other side, you've got its replacement, the USMCA. Vincent describes this as way more than just a little update. He calls it a full-on modernization, built for the 21st century, with new rules to protect digital trade and American ideas, all designed to bring jobs and investment back home.
But it wasn't just about trade deals. The book points to a whole strategy to get the economy roaring. The big Tax Cuts and Jobs Act gets a lot of attention as a key piece, designed to help U.S. companies compete on the world stage. Then you had deregulation. The author talks about rolling back some of the Dodd-Frank rules put in place after the financial crisis, arguing it lets smaller banks lend more freely. And across the government, the book describes this massive effort to cut what was called red tape, everything from environmental rules to other regulations, all to fire up domestic energy and make it easier to do business.
All right, so let's shift gears a bit. That same America First idea wasn't just for the economy. It was also the absolute foundation for the administration's foreign policy. The book describes a major pivot away from how things had been done for decades, all based on a pretty old-school idea the author calls peace through strength. Let's take a look at what that actually meant.
This quote right here, which the book highlights, is pretty much the key to the whole thing. The idea, as Vincent lays it out, is that the administration believed a strong, powerful military wasn't about looking for a fight. It was about preventing one from ever starting. It's the ultimate deterrent. And that philosophy, he says, was the justification for a huge new investment in the military, which the administration felt had been weakened by budget cuts over the years.
And we're not just talking philosophy here. The book puts some serious cash behind that commitment, a proposed $54 billion boost for defense in the very first budget. Vincent argues this wasn't just about spending more money. It was about sending a clear, powerful signal to the rest of the world that military readiness was back as a top priority. And he details how that money was aimed at things like upgrading old equipment and investing in new tech, like cyber defense.
So this peace through strength idea led to some really big moves, and this timeline gives you a great snapshot of what the book covers. I mean, every single one of these was a major break from the past. You had the withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal, the historic face-to-face meetings with North Korea's leader, the creation of a brand new military branch with the Space Force, and then a series of really interesting diplomatic deals in the Middle East.
Now, there's one event here that the book really zooms in on, calling it one of the administration's biggest wins on the world stage, the Abraham Accords. This was a huge deal because these agreements normalized relationships between Israel and several Arab nations, something that just hadn't happened in decades. The author presents this as a historic breakthrough that totally reshaped alliances in the Middle East, creating new partnerships for security and business.
Yeah, we're really just scratching the surface here on some of these really complex topics. So for anyone out there whose curiosity is piqued and who wants to get into the real nitty-gritty of the author's take on these economic and foreign policy moves, you can find Bill Vincent's book, The Trump Legacy, right on Amazon.
Okay, so we've talked foreign policy. Let's bring it back home to an issue that from day one of the campaign was an absolute centerpiece of the agenda: immigration and border security. The book makes it clear that this was seen not just as a policy issue, but as a core question of national sovereignty.
So how did they tackle it? Well, the book lays out this three-pronged approach. First, the one everyone knows, build the wall. The book presents this as a very straightforward physical tool to stop illegal crossings. Second, a new policy of zero tolerance, which was a big shift that meant anyone caught crossing illegally would face criminal prosecution. And third, a push to change the whole immigration system from one based on family ties to one based on merit, where skilled workers would get priority.
And all of this intense focus on borders, on an America First approach, it all builds up to what the book sees as the final and most lasting legacy. Because beyond any one law or policy, the author argues that this presidency created a whole new political movement and left a deep, long-term mark on American culture and its institutions.
The book even gives this movement a name, Trumpism, and it's defined as something totally different from traditional conservatism. It's described as this unique mix of ideas: populism, which is all about the regular person versus the elites; nationalism, which means putting your own country's interests first, always; and maybe most importantly, a total rejection of the old way of doing politics. This combination, the author argues, completely changed the Republican Party.
So this wasn't just a political thing. The book argues it spilled over into culture, big time. It points to this big push to, as they put it, restore American patriotism. This included things like the 1776 Commission, which was created to promote a specific view of American history. It also meant a very public defense of things like national monuments and cultural traditions, all of which, the book says, was framed as a necessary fight against a culture that was losing its national pride.
And of course, you absolutely cannot talk about a long-term legacy without talking about the courts. The author really emphasizes that one of the most durable, long-lasting impacts was the appointment of hundreds of conservative judges to federal courts, and that includes 3 Supreme Court justices. The book makes the case that these judges will be shaping American law and society for many, many years to come.
So, to wrap up the book's entire argument, this final quote really hits the nail on the head. Vincent concludes that, for millions of people, Donald Trump wasn't just another president. He was seen as a champion for the forgotten man and woman, a leader who took on the establishment for them, and someone who finally gave power back to the people who felt they'd lost their voice.
So there you have it. That's the big picture view presented in The Trump Legacy. If you want to go deeper and get the author's full breakdown of all the policies and events we've touched on today, the book by Bill Vincent is available on Amazon.
And this is where the book leaves you, with this one big, lingering question. It frames the whole presidency as an era of bold leadership that just blew up the status quo. The question it leaves for all of us is, how will historians in the future look back on this time? Will they see it as a much-needed change of direction for the country, or as something else entirely? According to this book, only time will tell. Thank you for listening to the Deep Dive Podcast.